The honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, just moments ago, the Assembly of First Nations, which represents Indigenous peoples across Canada, issued a declaration publicly opposing Liberal Bill C-21. This Liberal hunting gun grab is not only a threat to the livelihood of hunters, trappers, and sport shooters, it is a violation of the treaty hunting rights of all First Nations. When will this Prime Minister end his attack on law-abiding hunters and Indigenous treaty rights and stop Bill C-21?
You're here.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, today Liberal members of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security alongside the Bloc Québécois and the NDP requested 2 urgent meetings to be held immediately. Mr. Speaker, the premise behind this is to work together. To work together with the Bloc and the NDP. Unfortunately, the Conservatives, Mr. Speaker, continue to be part of the problem versus being part of the solution. Mr. Speaker, the mission here is to get guns off the street and
ask the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to...
God, don't let us hear that again.
that I may have missed.
Come back to it after QQ.
I'll do it now. The honourable member for Kildonan and St. Paul, does she want to withdraw the statement she made, please?
Statement, Mr. Speaker.
And apologize. Both. I'm sorry. I've got all day. I guess it's a standoff, and maybe I'll just consult my table officer so I know exactly what to do about this. I'm going to ask one more time for her to apologize, the honourable member for Kildonan and St. Paul. She's not going to apologize. Thank you. Ms. Dancho, I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you withdraw from the House video conferences for the remainder of this day's sitting.
Thank you very much. Today I was removed from the House of Commons for telling the truth. And I was raised by a very strong woman who told me never to back down from the truth, and that's exactly what I'm doing. The Liberal government got up in the House of Commons and insinuated that Conservatives have been obstructionists when it comes to Bill C-21, that we are part of the problem. And they were talking about a sneaky letter written by Liberals, the Bloc Québécois and the NDP that Conservatives were not invited to participate in. And this is carried out in light of the Liberal government bringing forward the most underhanded amendment in the most underhanded way that is the largest ban of Canadian hunting rifles in the history of our country.
That's right.
So again, they have banned the largest and the biggest and the most incredible change to impact everyday hunters. Millions of hunters will be impacted by what they've done, and they brought it forward at the 11th hour in the most sneaky and underhanded way. And for the past week, in partnership with the Bloc Québécois, the Liberals have filibustered and not allowed Conservatives to weigh into the debate at Public Safety Committee. And so today in the House, to hear a Liberal accusing us of being the problem, insinuating that we are obstructionist, is the most hypocritical thing I have heard in the 3 years that I've been elected as a member of Parliament. The most popular piece of feedback we get from our constituents is that the Liberal government does not answer questions, that they don't tell the truth. And so today we had enough of it, and I called them out for lying, which they did lie. And I will say it again out here, that they lied today in the House of Commons.
That's right. That's right.
Ms. Dancho, can you clarify what exactly are you saying the Liberals did without informing the Conservatives? Can you just clarify what actually happened?
So the Liberal member who stood up and lied, he was talking about a letter written to the Public Safety Chair. And Conservatives were not informed of this. We were not invited to the table to discuss it. And so that was the Bloc and the NDP and the Liberals working together without the consent or knowledge of Conservatives. But then the Liberal gets up today and says that we're part of the problem, insinuating that we are being obstructionist. But we weren't even invited to participate in that 1064 letter. And the only reason they brought forward that 1064 letter is because the Liberals have so circumvented the democratic process of legislation that they're now scrambling, having heard from thousands of hunters from across the country how badly they screwed this up, how much of an impact this is going to have on everyday hunters and farmers and Indigenous hunters and wildlife conservationists. They're now realizing what they did, so now they're scrambling and backtracking and trying to get extra meetings for witnesses. They want 2 meetings for witnesses, and they expect 2 meetings. That's 4 hours of testimony to represent 2 million hunters in this country. And we're talking from the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Métis, First Nations, Inuit, BC, Manitoba. Every province, every region has its own experience in hunting culture. And they're expecting all of that representation to be done in 2 meetings. And they did this behind our back, without our consent, brought it to committee, and got up in the House of Commons today and lied about it, and said that we're part of the problem there, and that we're being obstructionist. And the only reason Canadians know about this is because Conservatives alerted Canada to what they were doing. The Liberals wanted to pass this amendment and all of their other amendments for Bill C-21 in 1 week. They wanted this done by Christmas time. The only reason that isn't being done, and the Liberals have so-called time to consult, is because of the hard work of the people behind me who've been at committee bringing their constituents' concerns to the table. That's the only reason that they have time to consult, is because of the work of Conservatives. And now it's not working out so well for them, so now they're cutting out Conservatives from the conversation and have filibustered all this week, so we haven't had an opportunity to speak at all for 2 committee meetings. So it is very clear that Conservatives are doing everything we can to do right by hunters in this country. This is an attack on the culture of hunting in this country that's centuries old. It's not given any dignity, no democratic process. They've circumvented it in the most underhanded way possible. So for them to get up in the House of Commons and say Conservatives are part of the problem when we're standing up for Canadian hunters, it is a lie.
So you're clear that you weren't informed of this proposal. I'm wondering now, do you support having more witnesses come to the committee to testify about these amendments and these changes as that letter proposes?
So what we would support is if they withdraw this altogether, and they can bring, exactly. And if they want to, they can go across the country and do the appropriate consultations that they should have done before they ever brought this forward. Exactly. And then, if they bring it forward in a fully informed piece of legislation, which they have every right to do with the Bloc and NDP, I'm sure they'll get their support. The Bloc and NDP have been in lockstep with them on gun control. They can do that, and then we have that time to bring forward witnesses as appropriate in our process that happens every day in the House of Commons. The idea that now we would have to, or at the end stage of committee, that we're going to fit in 2 witness meetings is ridiculous and doesn't do justice, and frankly, it's offensive to all the witnesses that should be at the table. So if they want to agree maybe to 50 meetings so we can adequately consult that the people deserve to be consulted, then maybe. But there's no way. They've said they want 2. Which is offensive.
And I understand the principle of what you were saying about how the Liberal member categorized your comments, but I'm wondering, you know, the House of Commons has very clear rules that say you cannot call a person a liar, even if they are lying. Are you prepared to withdraw those comments?
So I did withdraw. I immediately withdrew those comments when the Speaker asked me to, and then he asked me to apologize. I'm not apologizing for speaking the truth.
Yeah, that's right. Here.
Particularly the substance of the amendments. Are the Conservatives opposed to both the definition and the list? Does the party take issue with both of those elements, or is there one in particular?
Well, it's quite a complicated piece of legislation that they brought forward. That amendment is very complicated. Again, it's taken us 6 weeks just to understand the basics. You need to have almost a PhD in gun technicality just to understand this new definition, which is going to mean that your average hunter is going to become a criminal because he's not going to be able to understand what's going on here. We've had all of the politicians at the table for 3 weeks now, or 6 meetings, trying to understand the basics of this, and it's still unclear. So I would say that our issue is with the entire formulation of the amendment.
So both.
Yeah, and if I could say, I think you've all seen this list. So there's Part 1 of the amendment, G4, and Part 2, G46. So G46 is that very long list. A lot of those have been banned since the 1980s. The rest of them are from that OIC from May 2020 that they've since added to. And now they've also added another 480 to that original OIC that are brand new that hunters are very upset about because many of their firearms are on there. What's not on that list is part of the Part A of that amendment in G. That's the semi-automatic definition there, which encompasses thousands of models of firearms. Those aren't even on that list. We found that out officially today. So if that list is about this long, the real list is about this long. Yeah. So hunters haven't even seen the half of what the Liberals are trying to do today. So they want to talk about not working together and standing in the way. What are they doing to hunters that they brought forward a list about this long of their hunting rifles and there's been no consultation? The only consultation they can refer to is from 2018 when they went to Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Fredericton. That's who they consulted, apparently, when they were talking about banning hunting rifles. Not very democratic, in my opinion. So, yes, I mean, the emotions are high right now. But I'm not going to apologize for speaking the truth when they lied blatantly in the House of Commons.
Definition of what would be an assault weapon that would be automatically banned. Why is that problematic rather than having this constant list updating, right? That's kind of the goal of having a definition. So what is wrong with having this definition?
Well, our leader, Pierre Poilievre, has been very clear. He does believe we need a new classification system, very much. That's clear. We need to bring people to the table, Indigenous hunters, firearms experts, competitive Olympic sport shooters, police and border agents, among other experts at the table, to once and for all make a clear classification system of what non-restricted, restricted, and prohibited are. Because clearly the Liberals have been playing politics with this now for almost 3 years. That has to come to an end. And so we would consult the experts on this and renew the classification system so that it finally makes sense and is fair to hunters and farmers and everyone else who uses these tools. So that's what we would do.
And do you support I'm going to screw up their acronym, CCFRA? They had the hashtag Poly. They also support your party. Your party is connected to them, are they not?
With their own independent organization. They're not connected to us in that regard.
Their concerns.
We champion the rights of lawful, tested, vetted, and respectable hunters, sport shooters, First Nations hunters. Those are who we champion. There are advocacy groups against that are very anti-gun control, and those are those that are in favor of firearm ownership. So who picks up our videos and things is really up to them. So I don't know really what you're saying.
On them using the hashtag Poly as a sales pitch, as one of their discount campaigns. Referring, of course, to Polly Soubian.
Right. So I was on CBC Power and Politics the other day and publicly condemned their comments. I find them reprehensible.
Can you about something else about the RCMP suspending its contract with Singular Technologies?
Yeah, I'm happy to have that conversation with you offside. I did want to just come out and address the injustice of... Okay, so if you just want to ask me real quick.
The RCMP has suspended its contract with Singular Technology. What do you think about that? What do you think should happen next?
Well, my understanding is they've actually implemented a lot of the technology already in Saskatchewan and Ontario. I haven't heard if the Prime Minister has ordered them to remove that technology. That is the problem we're concerned about on a national security level. So has he made that commitment to you? I have not heard that happening, so I would ask that you ask him. And we're certainly going to be putting the pressure on. What I was concerned about at the gate, he said, we'll make sure this never happens again. But this technology is already being put in place. He has the responsibility to ensure that that's removed. First and foremost. So that would be my comment there, but we should probably go. Thank you very much.
Over the course of the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I've continued to have conversations at our House Leaders meeting and with other House Leaders about decorum in our place of work, in our Parliament. And one of the items that has been coming up, and I thought we were making good movement on, was to cease the practice when another member is speaking of yelling at them. Not only is that in violation of the standing orders, I would suggest that in any workplace, screaming at somebody while they're attempting to conduct their work is inappropriate, and it is a practice that not only in convention of the standing orders, but frankly, just common decency. Today, Madam Dancho, while a member was answering a question, began screaming, which was clearly in violation of the standing orders of the House. She screamed unparliamentary language. The Speaker asked Madam Dancho to both withdraw the offending comments that were unparliamentary and also to apologize. The fact that Madam Dancho thinks that it is appropriate to use unparliamentary language and unparliamentary ways of communicating and to scream when people are answering is concerning. I lament the fact that she chose not to apologize. And let me reiterate that the way in which we talk to each other matters. Screaming at one another is not what Canadians expect us to be doing. This world and this moment calls for us to do much more in how we comport ourselves in dealing with one another. And I would certainly say that on the matter we're discussing, that this is a deeply emotional subject. That Bill C-21, which aims to remove assault-style weapons from the streets and handguns, is coming because we've had horrific events of violence in this country, and we want to ensure that the offending weapons are taken off the streets. There have been very legitimate concerns raised by hunters about some of the weapons that are there and wanting to make sure that weapons that are used for hunting are not included in that list. That's an incredibly reasonable position. Committee has an opportunity to look at, in its meetings, which weapons might be excluded and to work collaboratively. The bottom line here is that Parliament should be seeking solutions and answers, not seeking to raise anxiety and not looking to create problems. So on many different levels, I take exception and umbrage with the way that Madam Dancho comported herself today. I hope that this is an opportunity for all parliamentarians to step back and think carefully about the workplace that we're in and the type of behavior that we use when dealing with one another.
Do you have any concerns about the Speaker's ruling? Do you think he made the right decision in having her expelled from the chamber for the day?
One of the things that we've been talking about at the House Leaders meeting, and I was hopeful that we would come to that conclusion on our own, that screaming at somebody when you do not have the floor, when the turn is not yours to speak, is inappropriate. It's inappropriate in Parliament, and it's inappropriate in any workplace. So first, just on the fact that Madam Dancho was choosing to scream and yell when it wasn't her turn to speak is unacceptable. Secondly, that when the Speaker identified that not only was she screaming when somebody else was speaking, which is against the standing orders that are present in the House of Commons to maintain decorum, she also used unparliamentary language on not one but two separate occasions, and she refused to apologize for using that language. In my opinion, the Speaker was upholding the standing orders and, frankly, was upholding the spirit of the conversations that we had in House Leaders meetings about how we comport ourselves and how we talk to each other in the House.
Minister, I'm sorry, and just for the benefit of the clips, I believe it's pronounced Raquel Dancho.
Dancho, my apologies.
But I just wanted to go back to the actual substance of the criticism from her, because you're talking about parliamentary process and consulting parties, but your government last minute tabled these massive amendments to this bill that's supposed to be on handguns, now covers assault weapons, bans hundreds of assault weapons, at the same time as coming in with a new definition literally at the end of November during the committee process. So why is your government trying to ram this through now?
First of all, let me acknowledge that your question is a good question and it's a fair question. And let me acknowledge that I appreciate that you aren't yelling at me or screaming at me when I'm responding. And let me acknowledge that when we're talking, I wasn't yelling or screaming at you when you were asking your question. That in Parliament, I'm going to both answer your question and it has everything to do with your question. When we are dealing with something as sensitive as gun violence, as sensitive as guns, as sensitive as people's hunting, which is a way of life for them, how we talk to each other matters. That when somebody has the floor in the House of Commons and it is their turn to speak and it's their turn to ask a question, that we have a responsibility to listen and not to scream at each other and not to use unparliamentary language. How we engage is fundamental to our democracy. The types of ways that we talk to each other is fundamentally important. And let me get exactly to the point that you've raised. I have said, as of course the Minister of Public Safety has said, as the Prime Minister has said, the objective of the legislation that we have put forward is very squarely to make sure that we can remove the types of weapons that have been used in mass casualty tragedies. But what we have also said is that we deeply respect the way of life that hunters enjoy, and that we want to make sure that any weapons that might have inadvertently been included that have to deal with hunting, that we take the opportunity in committee to move through those.
My question is, what was the point of the rush in the first place? There was no briefing, there was no explanation of what the government was doing, there was no announcement. It was tabled at committee, handed this massive amendment, more than 300 pages. It was rushed through by the government, and now the Conservatives are trying to slow it down and make sense of it, and your government is belatedly following up by adding just 2 more committee meetings.
Well, there was a lot of editorialization in that. I would say that the reality is that you're absolutely right. The amendments were brought forward, and it was very clear that we needed to step back and more time needed to be taken at committee. That right now we are unable to have anybody else speak or move forward because the Conservatives are conducting a filibuster. We had the Bloc Québécois make the suggestion of special meetings so that we could go through all of the different guns and make an identification of whether or not they fit this classification of being something that's used to kill people or something that's used to kill animals. And that is a very sensitive process. I want to thank the Bloc Québécois for that motion, that 1064, which enables that special meeting to occur so that we can have the kinds of conversations that you're exactly speaking about. What we need to do over the forthcoming couple of months is to take a step back and to make sure that we focus squarely on what this legislation is about, which is keeping our streets safe. And the fact that there are concerns that have been raised by the hunting community is something that we take deeply seriously. And we've heard that within our own caucus, we've heard that within other parties, and that's why we need to take the time at committee. And that's something that we are absolutely in favor of. But at this moment in time, with the question to point that you've made, at committee right now, we're not even able to engage in that debate because there's a filibuster going on, which begs the question. I'm here today saying I want to move forward with answers and solutions. I've been clear what I both think the problem is and what I think the solution needs to be. What I'm saying, unfortunately, it appears the Conservatives are more focused on creating and exacerbating the problem than they are in talking with us about what the solution is. We are ready at committee in additional meetings. We have several set aside to go through the technical aspects of it, to work with other parties on this.
What's the rush? Why did the government rush this in the first place? That's the question.
Of course. So there is no hurry right now. We have just said we're so. Well, of course. Look, first of all, there is absolutely no question that we are committed to making sure that the types of weapons that were used in mass tragedies like École Polytechnique are removed, and that the amendments, when they were put forward, there was an earnest attempt to do exactly that. What has happened subsequent to that is people have identified concerns, people have identified areas where they think that amendments need to occur, and we have said that we're going to step back and we want to work with other parties to take the very time that you're talking about to get it right. That's precisely what we're doing right now. One of the things that frustrates us is that in order to do that, we need the committee to actually be able to do its work. Right now, the committee can conduct no business because the Conservatives are filibustering, and means that we are not able to have any discussions at that committee, which is why I appreciate the Bloc Québécois, which brought forward a special tool, which is a 106.4, to allow us to have special meetings so that we can actually get to the work of compromise and do the very thing that you're talking about. So right now, we are taking a step back. We're acknowledging that there were concerns with the amendments, and we're working proactively to find solutions to that.
Why didn't you consult with people first before coming up with these amendments? Why propose amendments and then consult?
Well, I think it's fair to say that when you're dealing with a classification of firearms, that there's a possibility for ambiguity to be there, and that when those amendments came forward, it was identified that some of them created angst and consternation and potentially impacted things that we weren't looking to have an impact on them. So that's why we're saying let's take a step back and make sure that doesn't occur. Let's take a step back and have the committee go through on a technical basis all of the different guns that are present. Let's make sure that we get back to the square focus of this bill, which I think has the overwhelming support of Canadians, which is to get assault-style weapons of mass, frankly, that have an ability to do a lot of damage that I don't think Canadians want to see on our streets. They have the opportunity to take those and have restrictions on them.
The Conservatives said when they came out here today that the 106.4 motion was proposed without their knowledge. The letter was sent to the chair without any consultation with them, and that to suggest that they were standing in the way of the process is unfair because they didn't know anything about the process. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, I think that, I have to say that the Conservative House Leader and I, on many different issues, have actually had very productive conversations, and that we're working on a wide range of things. I would suggest that instead of, talking around each other, we should have a direct conversation. If the Conservative position is that they're willing to stop filibustering and have meetings on the technical elements and be able to actually work through these items and take that time, I think that would be very constructive, and I would welcome that.
The Conservative position when they were out here is that the only thing that should happen with this bill is that it be withdrawn. Is that on the table?
Let me be very clear. The promise that we made to take assault-style weapons off Canadian streets, the promise that we made to ensure that the types of weapons that were used in mass casualty events, such as the Call Polytechnique, is a commitment that we are going to keep. We ran on it. We've continued to state that that's our priority. And I understand the Conservatives want those assault-style weapons to continue to be legal. There is a fundamental difference between our two parties on that, and I think we have to acknowledge that that exists. But that objective is not something that we will let go. What we have said is that the Conservatives who said they have concerns that are outside of that point, that some of these guns may be used, that may be banned, that are commonly used in hunting. That's not our intention, and we want to work with all parliamentarians that guns that are conventionally used in weapons are not part of this bill.
Earlier you said months when you were talking about consultation still to come. So are you confirming that the bill is now months away from going through the House, that you will take months?
Well, first of all, no. I'm sorry. I don't know. I mean, I think that what we don't know right now is that is how long this discussions are going to take. And I'm not the Minister of Record. I'm simply the person who is responsible as the House Leader to try to move forward the legislative agenda. So please don't infer from that I have any knowledge that I don't. What I would say to you is that there is just a reflection that there are a lot of conversations that have to take place with parliamentarians, with stakeholders, those that are involved in advocating for victims' rights, those that are advocating for hunting, for us to get to a place where we can be on the same page. And that I would ask, and I think this brings me back to the conversation we're having about how we talk to each other in this House, that when we have a debate that's as emotionally charged as this, and as people are as passionate as they are on both sides, you can imagine when you're talking and you're speaking out on behalf of families that have been victimized, or people who've lost loved ones on one side, or on another side, people who enjoy hunting and want to make sure that important part of their life isn't compromised, that emotions run very high. And yelling at one another, not following parliamentary rules, not listening to the Speaker, refusing to apologize when you break those rules, it is incredibly unhelpful to the type of discussions that Canadians expect us to have. Because I would expect for any Canadian watching us, what they're looking for is for us to find a path forward, to find a way to work collaboratively, to find areas of commonality. And yes, the Conservatives want to continue to allow assault-style weapons. That position won't change. But that doesn't mean we can't find areas of agreement on hunting, as an example, and to de-escalate the kind of rhetoric that we've been seeing around that.
Just ask the one question on a different topic. The RCMP suspending its contract with Sinclair Technologies. Do you see the need within government for a discussion on reforming or tightening up the way that tenders are issued, contracts are awarded?
Well, as you're aware, that particular contract has been canceled, and a review is being undertaken. I think it's fair to say that at all times the government is reviewing its processes and policies. Canada enjoys one of the highest standards in the world in terms of how we comport ourselves on contracts and how we award contracts, but that isn't good enough. We always have to look to improve, and any time we cancel a contract, any time we have a successful contract or an unsuccessful contract, there's a learning that comes from that. And of course, the government has to ensure that we use that learning to improve our processes.
I think the contract is suspended. I don't know if it's been canceled.
Suspended, yeah, I'm sorry. Again, not my file, but I appreciate your...
I know. Do you think that this episode has illustrated any particular problems in the way that procurement is carried out?
Look, I think procurement has always, in a Canadian context, been conducted very, very well, not just by our government, by other governments. I think Canadians can be very proud of the way that the Canadian government has moved its way through procurement processes. That isn't to say there aren't errors. That isn't to say there aren't mistakes. That doesn't mean, even though that we have sort of a world-leading standard for procurement, it doesn't mean that there aren't areas that we can improve and learn from. And that happens on a continual basis. I mean, you have to be in a state of constant learning and evolution on this. And so that's something that's constantly being reviewed as we move forward.
Can you just clarify, do you distinguish at all between commenting on women's conduct and language and policing it, and what is the role of the Speaker in terms of determining parliamentary conduct? You seem to be making your own determinations. Is that your role, or is that the Speaker?
No, it's actually the role of the standing orders of the House of Commons. So the standing orders of the House of Commons are very clear. When a member is speaking, you're not to be speaking. Now, we allow that rule to be bent. People will talk in hushed, on both sides, in hushed tones. But one of the things I've been talking about is screaming or yelling or trying to shout down somebody who's talking. That's not appropriate. It's not only in convention of the standing orders. I would suggest that it's a very big violation of the spirit of those standing orders. If I can speak to you as a moment when I was first elected in 2004 and I was a nervous member standing up in the House of Commons for the first time. When people are screaming and yelling and you're trying to get out your point, you're not able to represent your constituents. You can't even collect your thoughts. I don't know if you've ever tried to speak when somebody's screaming at you, but it's incredibly difficult. And it means that that person who's trying to represent their point of view isn't given a fair or legitimate opportunity to do that. That's point A. The second point is the standing orders of the House of Commons, which again are not me. They are the standing orders of the House. They are to be enforced by the Speaker, as he did today. Clearly state that you're not allowed to use unparliamentary language, and that when you use unparliamentary language, you are to apologize. In every other instance, to be quite frank with you, I have seen members use unparliamentary language. This happens. Sometimes we get overheated. Sometimes we say something we shouldn't. That doesn't just happen in the House. It happens in our homes, in our lives. But there's an expectation when you use language that you shouldn't, that you apologize. And that's not only an expectation that exists in the standing orders and as is enforced by the Speaker. I would expect that it's something that you would expect in your own life, and I certainly expect in mine.
So is the distinction you're making that when the Liberal MPs get heated, shout down a question, they will apologize, whereas Ms. Dancho did not? Is that
the distinction I would make, and
obviously your side does it too, right?
No, I'm going to make a very clear distinction, and I would invite you to watch question period. We take great pains on our side to use hushed tones and to not yell. And I have very serious conversations with any of our members who yell during question period. And I would ask people to take a look at what's happening in question period. The NDP, the Bloc, and our party, the Liberal Party, are not screaming and yelling. There is a party that is doing that, and I have tried behind the scenes to fix this problem. It has continued and is escalating in different examples, and today is an example. And I think what's very disappointing today is not only are they the only party doing it, but they're somehow acting like this is a virtue to do this, to violate the standing orders of the House, to scream at people when they're attempting to talk, to use unparliamentary language and not apologize for it. That's not a virtue. That's not something you should be proud of. And I have tried for weeks to deal with this behind the scenes. I've not made an issue. I have not come to this microphone. I have tried to do it in the privacy of House leaders' meetings. I've tried to do it behind the scenes and talking to their House leader and to their whip. And this is where we are today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.